Awesome.
Why have I quit my job? Why have I, bought a van? And why am I going to drive around the country? Well, I'm passionate about the idea that you need to be heard. And I want to stitch these stories together across the states. We're going to find the commonalities. And it's going to be really an amazing experience. And I look forward to you joining me on the jar.
Hello, everybody. Welcome back to Mental Health Today. It's a dual show today, so it's kind of exciting. I don't think I've had where I've done two in one day, and I managed to squeeze in a jar podcast episode just a little while ago. Another great story on the books, and that'll come out in about 7 or 10 days. So I'm here in Little Rock, Arkansas, doing some recordings there. But I've also, by the beauty of the internet and the connectivity that we've got, just so lucky to have it. I've also got a great guest today on the show, Georgi. And Georgi's been a great help. He's already referred me to a few other passionate mental health professionals in the space. And I really look forward. I think it's, as Georgi said, for some random reason, I kind of reached out and we connected. And I think we share a lot in common, especially around the passion and the sense of urgency around what we're trying to do, the awareness and bring actual action into the space across as many disciplines as we can. Georgi, thanks for being a guest. Thanks for coming on. Why don't you share with the audience a little bit, who are you and what's that urgency? What's happening?
Ken, thank you so much for having me here. It's an honor and a privilege. So my name is Georgi. I'm tuning in from Bulgaria, Sofia at the moment, short after midnight. By the way, came back from London a couple of hours ago, so it's literally crazy, but things are moving. Actually, we had 2 days of an amazing L6 conference dedicated to digital health, medtech, and so on. A lot of meaningful things were said over the last 2 days in London. So I'm absolutely positive and optimistic as usual. That's a little bit my mojo anyway.
Yeah.
But yeah, happy to discuss, happy to chat. Mental health is a huge topic. We are living in a massive crisis that seems to be just worsening. It seems we are just in the very beginning of this, but yeah, probably we'll get back to this later in our chat. So my name is Georgi. My background is actually business and finance, and yeah, somehow already in the early childhood, I always found myself in between two main leitmotifs and themes. On the one hand, there was the entrepreneurial spirit.
Yes.
Always even breaking out from school and finding other things to do in terms of small endeavors and first gigs and tryouts. But what's actually more important is the second part, which was kind of human empowerment and support. So in a way, already in my early ages, I always was either in the support role of others, of my friends, of my family, and so on, or sometimes as well in the support role in terms of mental health. And this I realized just recently, in fact, but I will again come back to that. And in the later years, throughout student times and education and so on, I increasingly also discovered this kind of a achiever, millennial, and FOMO-driven youngster as the average Joe, in fact, that always wants to achieve everything and have everything right now, right here. Absolutely obsessed with productivity, self-development, nonsense, and all the other things into a fanatical level. And long story short, I was going well through that financial and consultancy kind of path, following the studies and so on. But luckily, in the beginning of 2020, just short before Corona outbursted in Europe, one of my nowadays partners just came back from Israel and was extremely inspired by two topics, one of them being mental health and more specific burnout. And the other leitmotif was digital therapeutics. And at that point, we decided that we want to start something new, to make a step into the unknown and start dreaming more about human empowerment in a more scalable
Awesome
manner.
time. Great timing.
Yeah, we didn't realize what's about
Yeah.
to like come come against us.
Yeah.
So yeah, I guess this is the short take. There's a lot of different bits and pieces, but in a nutshell.
Yeah, that is, I mean, I didn't realize I didn't if I look at your bio and what you're doing and what you're involved in, I'm frankly kind of surprised that you haven't been doing this for 10 plus years. I mean, it's surprising you really just started. Friend comes, I love this. A friend comes back from Israel, and then you change your career path and jump into something brand new.
Yeah, yeah, and again, maybe helpful also for the younger audience part. I guess there is another piece of synchronicity or serendipity, maybe better
Yes.
to use the term. Throughout my entire life, I've had this kind of a hypersensitivity, which I was also not aware of. So I'm overly
Oh,
empathetic, that I always deemed as rather a downside because it is a double-edged sword. You
yes.
sponge off other people, so you can connect and bond very quickly and very well. And sometimes a lifelong like friendship feeling for lifelong friendship can be established even within only a few minutes,
Yes.
and I always deemed it as as like a downside, and I was trying even to sweep it under the carpet and try to be this kind of a
Mm,
stiff professional and keep my long face and all the nonsense. Yeah, not to use any other words, but then again, once we started working into more and more into the mental health area, I just increasingly got inspired and understood. Okay, I may not have the professional back, I may not be a psychologist or a
yes.
psychiatrist by education. However, it seems that this somehow felt like the calling, and I'm purposefully mentioning this just for the reason
Mm,
that so many people nowadays are somehow obsessed in between two extremes, either the extreme of, oh, just think good stuff, think positive, the secret and so on, and things are going to happen, which unfortunately is not necessarily the case. Or especially the generations after myself, I'm now 31 rounds around the earth, still deem it only a fourth of my entire journey, but like the ones that are now going out of going into university and 10, 15 years
mm,
younger seem somehow to have already this kind of hook and craving and obsession, maybe even addiction to instant gratification, to
yeah.
not only thinking positive but deeming that firstly I'm amazing and I'm awesome just by default, which again is nonsense. You can be, but it does need to, you need to put in the effort firstly.
Yes.
And secondly, there is a massive uncertainty and anxiety. People are just afraid. People are afraid of rejection. People are afraid of
Mm,
pursuing their actual dreams and calling. And everybody's speaking a lot of, yeah, I need to be an entrepreneur, I need to follow a higher purpose and so on. But all of these ultimately are just empty words, because yes, we are talking the talk, but we are actually not necessarily walking the walk. And
mm,
and my kind of message here to everybody is, I am still an achiever, but I'm recovering now from this, and it was better. It was worse before. And just take your time and enjoy the journey. When you go on a global, you go on a world journey, you want to go a world trip. It's not about the end destination. It's not about rushing through all 30, 60, whatever countries. Yeah,
yes.
just for, oh, I need to get to the last point. It's about the process, and just be gentle to yourself, embrace whatever is coming at you. Yeah, search for what feels right or what feels wrong, and this is always a good orienteer, but don't rush it. No need for that. It seems we all want to be like these kind of stellar professionals at 22 or 24 or 5,
Yes.
whatever, have tons of money and stuff. And ultimately, we're definitely coming back later to this in our discussion. Ultimately, we are running away from ourselves. So on a
Mm,
super simplified, vastly simplified manner, if we need to, if I kind of brave myself into describing what's burnout in a sentence for third grader, then it's most likely just losing touch with your inner self. Yeah, you lose your capacity of understanding your body, your mind needs, what really drives your values, your personal internal compass. And
Yes.
unfortunately, we are living in a highly materialistic and consumer driven mindset and society. We're craving external
Mm.
validation. We're craving the next iPhone that we not need. We're craving all this kind of material. So ultimately, the ultimate outcome, we are growingly uncertain. We have massive fear of stepping out of our comfort zone. We crave to satisfy our ridiculous addiction for followers, notifications, external kind of falsified love, if you say. and
Yeah.
and ultimately we're
Validation.
trying
Yeah.
validation, exactly, and ultimately we act, and I was there. Yeah, I'm speaking just because of my journey so far. I'm speaking about my journey a couple of years ago only.
Yeah.
But ultimately what happens is that we are at the end of the day just humans, and we just need connection, we just need love, and
We
we're
just need love.
nowadays unfortunately trying to satisfy non-materialistic needs with materialistic manners.
Ah, yeah, yeah. That's a
So yeah,
bad.
before I get carried away.
Yeah. That's a bad. And that's definitely not healthy. I mean, if you
No.
are, we need that human connection, right? Like you said, and I mean, we need love, but the love comes from a human connection. And so
Yeah.
I think when we start separating from that part and we lose that curiosity of people,
Yeah.
we
And
walk.
that connection starts with the inner self. So our external world is merely a reflection of the internal one.
And
So
and if you're spinning, if you're thinking, if you're super aggressive in your career, or you're trying to satisfy the next urge, whatever that takes shape, whatever that takes form, your inner dialogue, you're not at peace, right? So you
no.
can't have that conversation of self. You can't you
Mm-mm.
can't have a good, calm, good frequency, yourself. Like you said, you described it earlier, either we're an anxiety level, it's fight or flight, right? We're fight or flight, or digest and
Rest and
rest,
digest.
and
Yeah.
digest, right? We're doing these two. You're waking up and it's instantly pick up the phone and look at something, which is
Yeah.
absolutely wakes up, the flight mechanism, and you're ready to go.
Yeah. And without noticing, we are ultimately running after somebody else's agenda before we actually give ourselves the space and time to just see what's going on. Maybe have a 5, even 10 minutes of mindfulness, absolutely
Yes.
sufficient. It's not about making these super big strides. We always are going for the big things. Oh, now I'm going to start meditating, I need to be half an hour at a piece and whatnot. But actually, even just a couple of minutes are absolutely sufficient. And then, you know building these kind of small habits, building this
Mm.
momentum within our daily routines, one can surprise themselves quite easily how many different opportunities we have of building in a moment of silence, a moment of appreciation, a moment of saying to yourself something nice.
Mm.
Sometimes I ask my friends, listen, can you think of your internal dialogue just from today, and could you answer me super honestly? Would you use that same way of talking if you would be talking to your mom or to a good
Oh
friend
my,
of
yeah,
yours?
yeah, yeah. Oh goodness.
And people are like, yeah,
Yeah.
mm,
That's a great question. I mean, anybody listening, right? Has your dial, would you have the same self talk? Would that be a reflection of how you talk to your mom?
mm,
Should be how you maybe talk to your son or daughter.
yeah, with humility and acceptance. But
Right?
it's
Encouragement and
difficult.
with love. I mean, with
Yeah.
love, and like you said, humility, acceptance, and hopefully you have a good talk. Hopefully that's how you talk to your kids most most of the time.
Mm,
Um, yeah, it is interesting. I think we talked. You were talking earlier and talking about the spirituality, and what I've seen, and I've seen what I've seen on the road with people with the jar has been really amazing. The journey that people go through, and that self discovery, and so much of it hinges on the part where they find themselves, and they're not all at the place of self love, but they're all on the journey, and it's that awareness that either they're there or it's a gap, and they're working on it. and that was part of how they ended up in the place they ended up with the story they had. Um,
Mm.
is that lack of self love, and it's powerful because once you have that, then you love everybody.
Yeah. It's maybe just to throw it in, it is a devil's crisis. It's a self-fulfilling negative spiraling down if you're chasing love from external. Yeah, if you're going out with your, let's say, internal love glass half empty or entirely empty and trying
Mm,
to fill it up with external means, that doesn't work.
yes.
It's a closed dead end street. Yeah. So before, it's just like when you're on the airplane. Yeah, if in case of air pressure loss,
Mm,
you need to cater first to yourself and then help and then to others. And with love and with connection, it's exactly the same. There is absolutely no sustainable way of experiencing acceptance, humility, love, support, empowerment for others if you cannot do the same
mm,
authentically first before anything else towards yourself.
yeah. Yeah. Totally agree. How about some of those other topics we were talking? You talked about earlier that you wanted to come back to, or also the other part is, what are you working on now? What can you share? What's that kind of exciting thing you're working on now? What keeps or what's in your head? What's next?
Yeah. So maybe also to get this kind of a more authentic bit into the talk,
Yeah,
everything that we're
sure.
discussing. I don't deem myself an expert by any means. I'm more of an experimental rabbit, and burnout. Actually,
Oh yeah,
once
but you might
my
be an expert in
partner.
that.
Yeah, yeah. No, I'm an experimental rabbit. So I'm always on the brink of burning out multiple times a year, playing around. So sometimes I describe it as a love affair. So it's a secret
Ah,
love affair. We know each other. We are quite attracted. We know it's wrong
yes.
to see each other, but we always find time.
Yeah, yeah.
So
Yeah.
um yeah, that's maybe an important piece. So once I kind of started discovering this achiever and that kind of constantly running after the next rabbit kid within me, and then they started searching for better ways and
Mm,
started encountering such, one of the driving motives was actually to spread the knowledge and to make it
yeah.
more accessible towards others. I'm not saying it's by any means the only way. So for every situation there are multiple ways out and multiple opportunities to overcome or to also prevent and so on. But that's actually the empowering piece. So everything that we do in a way is not really from an expert but rather from the experimental standpoint. So being an entrepreneur, I love learning by doing. So it's a constant fails and takeaways from them throughout my entire life so far. And we can discuss a lot of different things. So nowadays we're actually working on few different areas, but let's maybe get one thing straight. So
Mm,
our standpoint of view is, or the purpose of us being here on planet Earth is to actually contribute, to give, to empower, to love. And the current vehicle of doing so is obviously mental health. And the couple of projects that we are running. So on a very high level perspective, we have one baby learning to crawl called Digiburn.
okay.
This is a self-help mobile app for burnout, covering almost the entire burnout cycle, from prevention through overcoming of the and handling of the early stages, through recovery support and relapse prevention. So that's one thing. Then the other bit that we are extremely passionate about is female and maternal mental health,
Mm,
in the domain of postpartum depression. Again, with kind of similar thoughts, self-help instrument, and I'll maybe dig in a little bit into the mechanics of the underlying logic, how we want to empower.
mm,
And the third one that's now actually evolving, it's called the Humanship, and it's a movement, a collective, and a biannual event on human empowerment, on organizational empowerment, and ultimately co-innovation and co-creation of the working modi, of the approach to life, of
mm,
the approach towards organizational culture, and mostly again also individualistic empowerment, for creating the environment, the work environment, the planetary environment, the life environment for the next generations, for what's coming up next. Because as already discussed, we do believe that we are on the let's say on a in the times of a massive change, a massive leap. It is during hardship and crisis and downturn when a lot of new takes are being generated, and it feels that now's the right time. Having already accumulated quite a lot of trauma and stress, starting with
Yes.
COVID. Again, hopefully not too provocative, but seems multiple people, including myself, recently we've come to a similar conclusion that COVID unfortunately wasn't long enough or persistent enough for us as humanity, as organisms, as people, and also as societies, to really not only overcome it in terms of survival mode, but also to overcome it in terms of going out bigger, stronger, and wiser out of it. It seems that
Yeah.
we started integrating certain changes, starting discovering this kind of a new normal, and at some point we actually let the ball fall. So we just
Mm.
did it halfway. We still are kind of iterating on it, but it doesn't feel really consistent or coherent in a supportive and empowering way. And the result was this kind of an always on mode, completely blurred out boundaries, completely messed up culture of both the workforce that was experienced by the time COVID hit, and even worse so for the workforce that's now entering the work market. So it's a big
Mm.
guacamole of blurry boundaries.
A
And
big
yeah, and then
guacamole
on
of boundaries. I love it. That's a great.
lack of boundaries, yeah,
Yeah,
the
yeah,
guacamole is always a fluffy texture, right?
yeah,
The good one, at least, anyway.
yeah.
And then we unfortunately, straight after Corona, we jumped into this kind of a global politic, economic, energy uncertainty, the ongoing war,
Mm.
massive anxiety, massive stress, and all of this just accumulates. And we as humans, we are fragile. It's not that we cannot withstand. We can and we should, but thing is that we need our support mechanisms. So whenever we have such a massive transition, massive shift in approach to life, in culture, in viewpoints, in how we just approach our day-to-day agenda, we need also to have our opportunity to just step back, rest and digest, reconsider
Mm.
things, really spend a little bit of time of finding out what is the new internal point of balance for myself as an individual, then for us as for example, small friends or family circle, then the same also into the organization and also in the societal kind of perspectives. So everything comes on top of each other. We are increasingly running away from the internal self, so we are increasingly living in more and more disconnect. It's crazy how many people are nowadays being living lonely, living distance from
Loneliness.
everybody else. I see it again, as mentioned, with the younger generations, even worse. So we are absolutely addicted to this constant on socialization via online media and whatnot. But actually, we're losing touch. We're losing our capacity to make what's something super simple, right? To spend some quality time with a person
Mm.
without running 100 different directions in multitasking in our cognitive process during that. Actually having this kind of empathetic and authentic connection with others, and all of this accumulated can be extremely dangerous. And I actually believe that we are going to overcome it somehow, but the thing is that the reality is such. We are living in a mental health crisis, and that's why we started dreaming about this self-help
Mm.
empowerment. Because another aspect is the fact that mental health, unfortunately, is still quite old school. It's not like when you break your hand, you do an X-ray, and then the physician knows exactly how to proceed.
Yes. Yeah, yeah. No,
So
it's not clear.
we began dreaming about involving this real world data, empowering the individual as early as possible into the process, baking
Mm.
in also biomarkers, digital behavioral data, building the needed models for individualistic empowerment early on in the process. So that's what Digiburn does, and Momsanity as well. Basically offering this good digital coach, good friend of yours into your pocket within your mobile phone,
Mm.
that caters both to the short term, to the immediate needs, but also to the long term ones. And having a couple of iterations from purely the, let's say, a developer of a solution, we learned a bunch, we broke our head multiple times, and now we are absolutely confident that like the first and foremost crucial piece is actually user love, or we call it the Healy model or Healy pledge that we've been passionately working on the last 6 months or so, namely really understanding the in situation, in context, in place and time needs of the user. Because it's one thing to have like even the best psychological background, perfect, great. It's
Yes.
another thing to have perfect tech team to build it, to have the beautiful visuals, to have the UX usability and all the other things. But there is a third pillar that unfortunately quite often is being forgotten, and that's behavioral psyche. So really understanding how our emotional and also physical state and level of resourcefulness is really a constantly changing
Mm.
wave pattern. So it's very difficult, if not impossible, to find an easy balance between long-term goals or the
Yes.
desire to actually empower someone for the long term, for example, in terms of, I don't know, depression, burnout, or anything else like that, but actually balance it out with a short term perspective. And if I if I maybe come back to a metaphor, it's like when a small child falls on its face and starts
Yes.
crying. So the mom's first responsibility and urge is just to soothe and just to hug, right? She doesn't start
Yes.
asking questions. And first thing is soothing, and only then she can attend and cater to, you know, troubleshooting of the wound on the knee. And maybe
Yes.
only then she asks about the reasons, or gives a lecture about how next time the shoelaces must be tied up better and so on. So the same goes also in building digital solutions or building this kind of a non-human empathy. And I know that you were discussing a rather different take with Umar
Yeah,
earlier
Umar and I
today
had this something, yeah, very interesting
about, you
conversation.
know, the missing human piece and how important it is.
Yes.
Absolutely, I agree with this. However, thing is, the demand is vastly exceeding the supply.
Yes.
And we are not saying that digital or purely digital solutions are going to completely replace the need, the support of a professional anytime soon. It will happen sooner or later, probably, but it's not tomorrow, it's not the day after either.
It's
But
not.
building it, this kind of digital empathy, and trying to really adapt the algorithm in a way that you empower the user and understand that in a state of low, in a state of a low resourcefulness, in the state of a temporarily
Mhm.
or bigger disruption, maybe somebody is going through a bad day, a bad week, a bad month, a divorce, uh, a death of someone closely related, and so on. You need to understand what's going on. And this can be quite elegantly done by just finally making sense of the ocean of data that we already have in our devices, and just backing it up with a little bit of a manual, or let's say
Mm.
in situation prompt, that just serves as the qualitative indicator to really ensure that the general contextualization of connecting those dots really makes sense for this given individual at this
Yeah.
point and place in time. So that's what
Mm.
we've been dreaming. We really want to just build finally the so-called digital phenotyping. It has been out in the space for probably over 10 years now.
Wow.
But it seems more and more realistic and outside of the realm of just scientific publications where it was currently residing mostly. And yeah, we're just about to launch our third iteration of Digiburn, coming out to the public world around the end of this month. Um, and happy to see how we can empower, because this global mental health crisis, one of its aspects is really the burnout pandemic. So over half of the
Yes.
workforce is either endangered or even also already experiencing some symptomatics. And
Oh, for sure.
yeah, it seems that there is the need to work more for health instead of spending time in sickness. So work more for prevention, more for empowerment, more for a better connection with the inner self.
I think one of the, I mean, the, to me, it's just, it's mind boggling that we've got this enormous apparatus called health services that is treating all of the outcomes, all of the symptoms, largely, like a large amount of resources are fixing things that are a result of mental health issues. They manifest themselves as heart attack, as stresses, as as breakdowns, car accidents, all I'm sure some cancers, other health issues, obesity. As I talked to a gentleman last night, John, and John, was a heavy guy who was obese, and he said for him, it was a mental health issue. And he said, that's you, and it's a very difficult circle, because you can't look at yourself in the mirror without having weird feelings, and and it's he talks about that. So anyway, obesity leads to other health issues. So we have this enormous apparatus for symptoms treating, but we've got nothing on the prevention and the control for the individual. So I liked our conversation this morning with Umar, and then with you today as well, on whether it's a tool, whether you got it in your pocket, we carry it everywhere. And why not have that as something that will help you? And if that's not working, we can give people the skill sets, train people, teach people what are those cognitive behavioral therapies that are out there, right? That can help people stop the bad conversations with themselves.
And just
so
to give
prevention,
it,
I'm with you 100%.
Absolutely. And just to give it one more subtle yet unfortunately quite critical nuance, one of the issues with mental health is the fact that it's invisible. So it's when you look in the mirror, you don't see the issue. When you look at your colleague, you don't know what's going on in their head.
This is a really tough part.
Yeah.
Give some grace out there, people. Have grace for other humans. We just don't know what each person is going through. You want to, we're tight on time, but I want to just talk briefly, because this is, I think this is also a place that I thought I might play around with, which is on the HR side and cultural change in workplace. I've been in the workplace. I've been in many corporates. I've had the luxury of working in literally hundreds of companies over the years. Just by virtue of the role as a regional executive for different companies and visiting different country operations around Asia. And so I've seen lots of CEOs and everything else, and change in cultural change from the top down to a country, down to an organization, down to a department is very difficult. And so I think the idealistic side of getting corporate to help us change and become more empathetic and lead with love and the heart. We talked a little bit, something close to this offline. So I thought I'd bring kind of a little bit of the conversation. Change in general, how do you think we can overcome and get through? Because the workplace is a great place to bring tools. It's a great place. A lot of stress comes from work. It's a source of a lot of stress, and it's a source of training. It's a place where people learn. It's a great place to actually deliver the training and the tool set. What do you think the hopes are on that? And what are the first steps? What's that first stuff we need to be doing today to kind of get some change started?
So by design, in the way we approach life, let's start with individualistic perspective. So the first step is obviously taking ownership, understanding that, yes, maybe your workplace is a resource or a source for a lot of stress. However, ultimately, it's not the stress or it's not the external circumstances, but rather the internal ones. So the better connection you have, the better capacity you have to differentiate, understand which stress is desired, which is productive or which can help you propel, and which is the destructive one. Also understanding a little bit more around your metacognition triggers and why do you deem a certain situation stressful, because two individuals in the exact same situation, one could be absolutely stressed or even burnt out, the other one might be just whistling and saying, hey, why is it so boring, what's going on? So it's a lot of subjectivity, but the key point here is really taking on the ownership. And then this same trend also goes towards the workplace. So for example, mental health and also burnout unfortunately is being passed as the hot potato, because especially, for example, there are a lot of countries in Central Europe. I don't know how it's in the US, but in Central Europe, a lot of people have the mindset that my health is somebody else's responsibility. So
we have a good bit of that here, I'm sure.
Yeah, as I said, I'm not familiar, haven't yet been to the US.
Mm.
But thing is, the more we consider that any aspect of our daily agenda is somebody else's business, it's a definitely great recipe for
Yeah.
failure and for
Yes.
yeah,
And
for
disappointment
bad
on
feelings and
everybody's side.
disappointment.
Everybody will be,
So
the expectation is wrong.
exactly. And within the organization, that's what has been happening across the
Mm.
board. And I'm quite
Ah,
confident it's the same here, US, Europe.
same,
It's exact same trends
same.
across the board, from shareholders, from board member, from high level, top C level, all the way to mid management, to team leadership, to HR responsibles, and so on. Everybody is somehow trying to pass the buck, is trying to pass the hot potato. Everybody is trying to a little bit push it away. And one of the reasons, maybe it's a little bit lack of the connection and maybe authenticity within the inner self, and maybe having the wrong motives, leading the life out of fear instead of love. So leading out of
I,
uh, survival mode instead of actually building something might be one.
yeah.
um,
You're not at a good, I mean, if you're also not in a good place, right, to stand up and talk about this is very inauthentic.
yeah. Yeah. And when you're not in a good place, and unfortunately, most of us are not in a
Yes.
good place nowadays, the only thing you can adhere is trying to egoistically attend and adhere to whatever you feel
Yeah.
right for yourself at the moment. But
Yes.
you are in a tunnel vision. You cannot cater, you cannot really
Yeah.
have the
Yeah.
needed empathy for others. So
Yeah. You
this is one
cannot.
thing. So people are a little bit egocentric, and I'm speaking about the organizational perspective. And then the other thing, which might as well be related, is the lack of leadership, because there are a lot of tools that are already introduced. Funnily, even in the US nowadays, like providers are propping up that are responsible solely for employee activation to use the existing pool of benefits and so on. So it's not like organizations are not doing things. It's
Yes.
more of understanding the actual intent. Is it just ticking off boxes? Am I, as the HR, now going to present a new thing just to fulfill my direct line of leadership, their
Yeah.
agenda, and then have a tick box?
Yeah.
Or am I authentic, and am I actually having the needed empathy and the needed involvement
Mm.
into this to actually stand up and to actually also, even
Yeah.
if needed, show vulnerability? So we run a couple of experiments last summer, was quite interesting, couple of first pilots with the previous Digiburn version. And interesting, we had two cases. In some companies it was just us doing the workshop, and then people enjoying and being super interested and inspired by learning a little bit more about burnout as a process, indicators, downsides, so on. But you could do so much. Yeah, this was a little bit
Mm.
perceived from the entertainment side of things, or passive consumption. And then again, there was actually an exception. There was a company that a certain leader stood up and said, "Guys, I was actually myself through burnout, and I would happily just share in 5 minutes, share a couple of insights." And oh boy, what a difference! So even one single spark of inspiration,
Yes.
one single person
Yeah.
showing, like setting off the mask, and showing actually it's okay not to be okay. It's just human. It's not showing a weakness, and I'm not lesser of a professional just because I've been through this. On the contrary, I've been through it, I've acknowledged it, I've integrated it, and now I have integrated it so strongly that I'm also strong enough to speak in front of others about it. And this completely breaks
That's
the
powerful.
paradigm.
That's very
It is
powerful.
powerful, but it's also rare, because there is still a lot of stigmatization. There is a lot of shaming.
Mm.
People don't want to be seen as weak. We are living in this absurd strive for perfectionism, for achieving, for
Yeah.
chasing the next white rabbit. We are struggling to show this vulnerability even in front of our friends and family, let alone within the corporate setup, where maybe we have a couple of direct commands. So maybe we have few people we are responsible
Mm.
for, or we have subordinates, or direct line of command, and so on. We don't want to be seen as the weakling.
Mm.
And this goes to both it's really across genders, across um yeah it's just human. And I think it seems this kind of a leadership by example and finally starting to destigmatize certain bits and pieces may as well be one part of the overall puzzle for creating the more empowering environment, because otherwise we're
Mm.
just introducing, we're just introducing tools for the sake of introducing tools that ultimately then are just collecting dust on the shelves and are not really doing any particular good.
Yeah, I that's one of the things I think that I'm really pleased to kind of look at overall as kind of a palette of you, if you will, from the jar podcast, is people really shamelessly sharing their journeys and
Mhm.
their recovery and the path that they're on now. I kind of the analogy I give is that these are, all good people that have been on some tough roads, and I'm catching them on this new road, and they've got a little map. They got their paper map, the old-fashioned paper map, and they got a compass and they got a pencil, and they're kind of on this new road, and they're telling their story in the jar, and it's empowering. It's like really uplifting because you hear their story, and it's like, man, I mean, some people's roads are pretty bad, some people's are less bad, but they're all on their own new road, and they've been on that journey, and the fact that we can have the conversation and it's done with they're confident, they're not
Mhm.
shamed at all, they're out there telling the story, and they're proud of the journey, and no one would replace what they went through. Nobody has ever said, I wouldn't do that again. They all say,
Mm-mm.
that's my journey. It's who I am. It's made me a better person. It's made me, now I realize why it's there. It didn't happen to me. It happened for me.
Yeah,
It was an
exactly.
opportunity.
Exactly.
These are, it's empowering stuff. And I mean, I think this is a great conversation, especially the things that you're doing now and the fact that you've only been doing this for a few years. I can't imagine what kind of force you're going to be in 4 or 5 years. How about some closing thoughts? And I'm sorry I butchered your name before. Like a good American, I saw it, Georgie. Help me one more
I,
time.
I can let you suffer a little there. Yeah, no, I'm from Bulgaria, so the Bulgarian way of pronouncing it is Georgi. Yeah,
Georgi.
it's
Oh yeah,
yeah.
Georgi, like a Yorkie, but Georgi.
Thank you. That's an interesting parallel. But yeah,
It's
it's yeah, Georgi,
Georgie.
George. It's completely fine. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. Boy, that's a
Maybe,
great.
maybe just a
Yeah, some closing
subtle
thoughts. Yeah.
nuance, yeah, to what you said before about the journey, about the learnings,
Mm,
about people being somewhere. So I think it's also you can never stress it out sufficiently. The importance of actually watching after you only and solely after your own journey.
yes.
Everybody else on this world is already taken. The
Mm,
only meaningful version that you can be is the version of being your own self. And instead
mm,
of comparing ourselves with all the nonsense that's going on through social media and constantly, searching for more validation of, okay, the Jones have this and I should catch up and
yeah,
whatnot,
yeah.
it's really about your own journey. And hey, if you haven't yet awakened, it's completely fine. So for some people it happens at an early stage, for others it happens at a later, sometimes it doesn't happen ever. But that's not the point. It's your own journey, and your responsibility is to be as authentic as
Mm,
possible within your own journey, not in the journey of your mom, not of your journey of your father, not of your friends or the neighbor or anybody else.
yeah.
And the sooner you actually get into this authentic perspective and just listen to your guts, your heart, and follow whatever you feel without shame, as you say, shameless,
Yeah.
unapologetically being authentic with your
Yes.
oneself,
Authentic.
this is always a good first step. So, as a closing thought, I guess, just please, please, please be authentic. Um, Care for yourself. Develop the needed self awareness of what your body and mind need, and that's definitely an important piece and a card in the deck for
Mm,
you choosing life happening for you, and you choosing to lead a more fulfilling way of life, because ultimately each one of us human beings is a born miracle by day one, by
yes.
default. You are good enough. You don't need to prove anything. You're absolutely perfect as you are with your imperfections. And yeah, just appreciate yourself. Give yourself time and space. Give yourself time to rest. Give yourself the power of tap if needed. Things are and will go wrong, but it's fine.
Yes.
That's where we learn. And it just stand up, dust yourself off, and you continue. It's your journey. It doesn't need to be aligned with anybody else. Just follow your path
I love it.
try to, enjoy the process instead of rushing through for the next white rabbit. Because you know what?
Yes.
Satisfaction will last for 5 more minutes before you decide for yet another different rabbit.
Another different rabbit. Georgi, thanks so much. Really appreciate it. Great conversation. Thanks everybody for supporting the Mental Health Today show. And, find us on all the regular platforms, and please do share and give us a like and all that good stuff. We will see you again soon.
Yeah, loose, baby.
We're about to go and make this vessel with these great professionals in public glass. We're not part of the community, but we're from the outer family of glass blowing. Yeah, we're going to go make a magical giant jar with optic lenses so that if you turn it, it changes all the time. So if you change the way you look at things, the things you look at change.